Phil 22nd, 2023. First, we're going to go through a few announcements and then get into the content for today. And I want you to stick around because toward the end of the video, I'm going to talk about something really exciting. It's a little experiment I'm going to try, and I might be able to get all of you involved if you want to be and if you're a good fit for this. But I'll explain that in a second, so stay tuned. First of all, some announcements. We haven't had another new training recently, so I'm due to do another masterclass or training with you. If there's a specific topic you really want to hear about, please comment on the video or DM me in the group in the Wits and Weights Facebook community, or just reach out directly. If there's a nutrition, training, mindset related topic, but otherwise, definitely I'll always have something good for you. So in the pinned post at the top of the group, again, this is the Wits and Weights Facebook community. If you're watching on YouTube, I always pin the most recent Ask Philip from last week, which I'm actually going to unpin because this is going to get replaced. It already should be with what you're watching. And then you can see the most recent training I did was on body recomposition. And I also have a post talking about the free metabolism assessment on my website, which is pretty cool. If you weren't aware of it, I just want to point it out again. You can get to it here, or you can go to witsandweights.com. And at the very top right, you can click free metabolism assessment, or on the home page, you can get to it here. A million ways to get to it. So on that page, what you do is you click the button, and it's a very short list of questions. I mean, it's not like 3 questions. It's something like 20, but they're very quick with a rating scale, so that I can get enough information to assess your metabolism and get back to you with a report on what that looks like, just to give you some context. So there's that. And then if I go back to the homepage of the group, what else do we have pinned here? Let's see. And then, oh, that's interesting. So that was the previous training. I'm actually going to unpin that so we can keep the videos pretty short, or the number of featured posts short. So then I have the last few videos are really how to use the group, always keeping those up there. So you know how to use the group, how to use this thread that we're talking about today. And this thread is called Ask Philip. Okay. So on the featured posts, either Alan or I will post this every Friday afternoon for the following Friday. And you're able to post your questions by Thursday so that I answer them on Friday, like I'm doing today. And then the new one will be pinned, and then you'll get this video. Now, there are actually no questions today. Sad face emoji. However, and you know what? And actually, here's the thing. It's not like we have thousands of people in this group. We have about 500 or 400 something and growing. Very high quality group. A lot of people super engaged, which is the kind of group that I like when I'm on Facebook and trying to scroll around for communities, rather than those that may have thousands of people, but there's not really a lot of engagement or good content. This is one of the most valuable things you're going to find in a group. And I modeled it after a couple groups that I'm in that do this. And I thought that is a great idea because it lets you as a community member ask a specific question for you and get help. I mean, what's the point in being in a social community if we're not to get social, talk about our challenges, our wins, ask help from each other? And of course, you can post anytime during the week and people will definitely answer you. For example, check this out. Okay. I wasn't even planning to talk about this, but if you look down here, you've got Smitha posted a form check, which is a super courageous thing to do, right? Because she's putting it out there for everyone to see. But this is a very safe, supportive community. And guess what? She got Dustin chiming in with a Loom video breaking down her form to help her out. And we all talked about how, the first time we ever put a video up of our lifting, it felt like everything was wrong. But because of that, you get feedback that helps you grow immediately for the next time. And next time could literally be 2 days later if you're squatting as a novice. And now you can start incorporating all those. And let's say you fix 5 out of 10 things. Okay, that's 5 less things you have to worry about. And now you can focus on those 5 remaining. And within a few weeks or days, perhaps, you're pretty much where you need to be in terms of your form. And now you can start to progress and get stronger, right? So that's one way you can use the community. Tony posted this win/joke that he needed a smaller belt because of all the waist size he lost cutting weight with me. But he also talked about the levers and the adjustments that happen to your body when you go between, more or less body mass as a lifter, which is cool. I tend to throw out questions here and there just to kind of poll the audience on what you're thinking. Occasionally I'll mention, I'll post helpful articles that I often also send to my email list, or podcast episodes that came out. Here's Dustin posting a video about how to step back in the squat, and on and on and on. So this is a super high quality community. And one of the best things you could take advantage of is the Ask Philip thread, because you can do just that. Ask me your question about your situation specifically, not a generic question that you could just easily hear on a podcast, including my podcast, Wits and Weights. So make sure to follow it. But a specific one for you, because we all have individual variances that affect us, and we might be following the advice that everyone's supposed to follow, and for whatever reason it's not working. Well, let us know. Let me know that you tried this and there's something that it's a little bit off. What would you do? And I will give you a response like this live, and it'll be available in a replay that says, hey, John, this is what you can try. All right. And I'm pretty nice guy about it. I'm pretty compassionate about these kinds of things. So hopefully you'll get a helpful answer every time. Okay. So here's the cool thing that I wanted to do today instead, since I'm already droning on longer than I expected. All right. So I reached out to Dr. Bill Campbell. For those of you who don't know him, he works at the University of South Florida. He was on my podcast. I'm going to just type it in Google here so you can see which one. It was episode 92. And we talked about 5 topics related to physique enhancement. One of those topics was rapid fat loss. Then in his research review that just came out, his Body by Science research review, he talked about that again in the context of low energy availability for women. And it was a protocol where the women had kept strength training, but they lost a ton of weight. They went into a huge calorie deficit for a certain period of time. And he gave his thoughts after the article with a protocol for what he would do to ensure that you could lose fat as fast as possible while losing as little to no muscle. And when he was on my show, we talked about a 2-week protocol. And then on his research review, he talked about an 8-day protocol, which is not very long, right? It's a very short duration. And the idea here is that you can really push that limit of fat loss. You can push the limit of fat loss if you keep the duration short enough so it doesn't start to cause physiological dysfunction, hormonal dysregulation, all of the things that happen pretty soon in a diet, especially if you're going hard and fast. So I actually reached out to him over Instagram, and I said, hey, Bill, and he doesn't mind you call him by first name, cool guy. I said, I'd like to try a similar protocol. I'm going to customize it a little bit. And maybe you want to use it as a case study. And he said, you know what? I would. He's gathering potential case studies. Now, anybody who knows how research is conducted, a case study is not at the same hierarchy of evidence or quality as a randomized controlled trial or meta-analyses of such trials. But if you can get enough different real life case studies, that could still give you excellent feedback on how people are applying these to real scenarios. So he said, hey, give me your plan and I'm going to give you some feedback on it. And then before you start it, and then what I could do is document my fat loss, in great detail, and kind of send it to him and help him with his research. Right. And maybe get him on the podcast again in the future. I've always got the little selfish thing going on, but at the same time, we're all helping each other out. So that's the win-win. So here's the cool thing. What I wanted to say today is I wanted to share with you my first cut at that plan. I haven't had feedback from him, so you're getting an early preview of this, but I also wanted to mention that maybe there's a chance for doing a challenge here in the community where anybody who wants to go along with me and do their own aggressive fat loss plan can do it. Now, the giant caveat here is that it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. I'm going to lay out a few people who it's probably for. It's definitely not for new lifters. Okay. So if you're not lifting yet, or you just started lifting, don't do this, please. Don't do this. I would focus on the fundamentals, on putting in place your nutrition so that you get into a routine with your meal prep, your meal plan, with your tracking, with understanding your body, with coming up to a healthy level of metabolism and so on at maintenance, or even if it is a slight deficit or a slight surplus, depending on your goals right now. An aggressive fat loss plan is probably not for you. who else is it not good for? Anybody who has a very low metabolism already, either maybe a smaller female who hasn't built up a lot of muscle to kind of increase your metabolism or increase your activity and step count, things like that. Or just somebody who has a low enough metabolism where an aggressive fat loss phase would be a miserable experience from day one in terms of calorie intake, miserable psychologically and physically. Okay. So this still leaves a lot of other people. So who is it good for? I think it's good for somebody who has already put in place the fundamentals of training, nutrition, routine, consistency, all the things we talk about in this community and on the podcast, and who has probably already gone through a muscle building phase or two, and at least one or two proper fat loss phases, like your typical 8 to 16 week reasonable deficit fat loss phase. So you have all the skills built in that when you go on this aggressive cut, you can do it effectively, quickly, without stopping, and without too much misery. And I say too much misery because there's going to be some discomfort no matter what when you do something like this. So if you know anything about calorie deficits and cutting, a typical cut is like 12 to 16 weeks at usually it's around 0.5 or 0.75% of your body weight per week. Then we have something that's often called a mini cut, which would be probably 6 to 10 weeks usually. And that's more for experience, like intermediate to advanced trainees, kind of the same population I'm talking to here, who like, for example, Tony, he's posted his progress. It took him 6 weeks to cut 15 pounds. I think that's right. So it was almost a mini cut for him, even though it was kind of the first, well-controlled fat loss phase, but he was already an advanced trainee and had good habits for his food and his tracking. So that's a mini cut. And there you generally push it to about 1% a week of your body weight. And I have a few clients that are doing that, and they're feeling good. Their lifting is still progressing, and they're holding on to muscle. So I love that. That for me has been the typical approach when I do a cut lately. And then I'm calling this a micro cut. So we have a cut, a mini cut, then a micro cut, which is this aggressive fat loss phase. So I'm going to walk you through my plan. Bill may completely tear it apart and it'll change, but I'm telling you my thoughts. The goal here is to eventually document all of this on a few different podcast episodes, potentially have a challenge in the group if you want to follow along. But again, it's going to be a very, very strict eligibility on that. But what we can do if I have that challenge would be probably do it for about, I want to say, either the 2 weeks of the cut or maybe a 3-week period where there's some prep and then the cut itself and then some follow-up at the end, where we can all be on the same page with regard to your personal plan. So to kind of like be a semi-private coaching experience is what I'm thinking. So if you're interested in that, comment below the video right now as I'm telling you my plan that, hey, yes, that's something I'd be up for, because I'm going to be asking anybody who wants to do that to be committed to documenting photos, measurements, tracking, all that stuff, so that we can get the before and after and get some really good data. And maybe that data can also help with Bill's research. If you want to share it, you don't have to. It could just be for the challenge. I'm not going to force anyone to do that. So comment below the video if this is already sounding like a cool thing for you. But here we go. An aggressive fat loss phase, I'm calling it a microcut. I want to do it for 14 days. Okay. And the reason I want to do it personally is really to experiment on it, to collect data, to walk the walk for my clients, for you, for my podcast, to be able to say, yeah, I did this and it can work. And here's what I learned from it personally. So I want to get, of course, a net loss in body mass. And this is calculated. This is going to be calculated by my scale weight data every day, which then rolls up to a trend weight that I get in MacroFactor, right? And again, if you don't use MacroFactor, the bar none best app on the market for food logging and, more importantly, expenditure calculation. It can calculate your daily metabolism. If you've never used the app before, go to your app store, download MacroFactor, and then enter my code, WITS and weights, all one word. Okay, I'm just going to put it here, WITS and weights, all one word, and you'll get an extra free week on your trial. So WITS and weights, all one word. Okay, I'm going to delete that from this version of the doc. I'm also going to track my lifting performance. I do anyway, right? I log all my workouts, but I'll be able to see, am I continuing to progress? which means I'm continuing to hold on to muscle. Now, I'm in a unique situation where I'm 10 weeks post-recovery from surgery. So I had 2 weeks where I didn't lift, and then I had very light lifting building into heavier and heavier lifting. So I'm right now in that sweet spot where I'm progressing closer to my normal loads on things like the deadlift, the deadlift for sure. I'm also benching again, but that's going to take a while to get back to my normal load just because that was related to my shoulder. And then I'm also doing lots of back work for scapular strength because that helps with the capsule here and help me get a better range of motion. I'm not able to press yet overhead. But the point is I'm giving myself as much stimulus as I can. I'm doing it 3 days a week, full body. Maybe if I did 4 days a week, I'd get a little more, but I'm trying to manage my recovery as well. So I'm actually kind of in a quasi building phase, making progress. And I think for me, going into an aggressive fat loss phase in October in a few weeks, I should be able to continue progressing my lifts is my point, because I'm not anywhere near my maxes, if that makes sense. So I kind of hope to get the best of both worlds on that. We'll see. I'm also going to track all my biofeedback, just like I ask my clients to do: hunger, digestion, sleep, stress, energy, recovery, all my circumference measurements, which will then give me an indication of body fat. Again, I don't think there's any accurate way to measure body fat, but the Navy formula is a good way to measure the trend in body fat over time, so I can see the before and after. Okay, so what's my starting data? All right, well, I'm 42 years old. I'm a male, 5'9". I weigh around 185. Again, it depends on when I start this. Currently, that's my weight. Maybe it'll be an extra pound or two by then because I'm in a very, very slight surplus at the moment. And my expenditure is around 2,900, right? Like in the past, it's been a little higher only because I've been walking more. And lately I've been around 10,000 steps, not my typical 12. And also the fact that I'm not able to get as much intensity in the gym. So not making excuses. I just think there's life circumstances that are suppressing my expenditure by 100 or 200 calories from where it normally is, but that's okay. So if your expenditure is way less than that, if it's like 2,000, it's going to be harder to do this, but still doable. If it's like 1,600, I think that kind of passes the threshold of, because to be in the diet, you're going to be like sub 1,000 calories or around 1,000. I don't really like that. Again, unless you're maybe very petite female, and it kind of makes sense. So you make the call. Okay. Here's the plan. So here's the money, right? Here's the plan that I'm proposing to Dr. Campbell, and I have no idea if he's going to tear it up. In his protocol, he had either 14 days at a 40% deficit, or in the latest research review, he talked about an 8-day plan with a 1-day refeed in the middle at a 45% deficit. I'm going to try to kind of combine those two in a way to get a little bit longer duration, the full 14 days, but with a couple refeeds at a higher deficit. So this is my idea. Maybe it's too aggressive. He's probably going to let me know, but here's my plan. I'm going to continue training what I'm doing. I'm going to make sure that I actually get 12,000 steps a day and just kind of give me that boost. So it keeps the deficit where it needs to be. I'm going to shoot for a calorie deficit of 45%. So that's a 1,300 calorie deficit from my maintenance of 2,900. And that is an intake of 1,600 calories. And that is the lowest I ever want to be. Because normally when I'm dieting, I get down to about 2,000 or 1,900 calories nowadays, and can go at a pretty good clip, but it'll take like, 8, 12 weeks of dieting. Well, now I'm going to go down to 1,600, which is like an extra 300 calories below that. So it's a meaningful deficit for me. And given that I'm eating right now around 3,050, like 3,050 calories in my slight surplus, it's a drop of like half, right? It's a lot. Now, I said that because I'm using MacroFactor, I'm going to know my expenditure. And if it shows a significant decrease because of immediate metabolic adaptation or some other reason, and I can tease out the fact that it's a real decrease, because MacroFactor is going to respond. In other words, like say a loss of water weight or something could also cause the algorithm to get off a bit. And I kind of know how to read between the lines on that. So from experience, if it seems like a marked decrease, I will cut the calories further for the second week to keep that deficit and just go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to keep them fixed. Okay. And by the way, if you're using MacroFactor, macro factor doesn't go by percent deficit. It goes by rate of loss. But what you can do is just kind of reverse into it and say, okay, I know what my expenditure is now. If I need to eat 1,600 calories, when you go to macro factor and set your rate of loss, you move the slider down and the calories will show on the bottom left. So for me, I'm just going to move it to the calories, say 1,600. And then I know I'm in a 45% deficit. That's all you need to do. So here's what I estimate my macros to be when that happens. I'm going to keep my protein at pretty much my, target body weight, which is going to be around 180 grams per pound, or 1 gram per pound. So 180. And then around 30% fat and the rest carbs. So now I'm going to be dropping from, let's see, currently I'm going to pull up my app right now. My carb target today is 340 and it's going to drop to 108. My fat target's currently 100. It's going to get cut in half. And then my protein target right now is 188. So honestly, it's going to be around there already, which makes sense. Protein stays about the same between fat loss and not fat loss. It stays the same all the time. Okay. Then here's the thing. Here's the special piece of this fat loss plan. I am going to have refeeds twice, 2 single day refeeds at days 5 and 10. Now, my logic behind this was in Bill's plan in his latest research review, he talks about 8 days and he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, refeed. So that's day 5. And then 6, 7, 8. 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's technically 9 days because it's 4, refeed, 4. So I'm kind of doing the same, but in a longer duration to see if I can kind of stretch out and get a little bit more fat loss. And so I'm going 4 days, then a refeed, then day 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 4 more days, then a refeed, and then 11, 12, 13, 14. So I'm actually tacking on 4 more days at the end. Again, Bill might think that is too much for this deficit. We'll see. So it's a total of 12 days in a deficit. And that would come out to be about 4 or 5 pounds of weight loss, hopefully all of it fat, because I'm giving myself that training stimulus and keeping the protein high. The 2 main things that matter. Okay. And by the way, these refeeds, how do I do them? I'm going to increase to my dynamic maintenance, which is around 2,900 calories probably, by increasing carbs. So my carbs are going to come up to like 300 grams or something, or 200 something grams on those 2 days to kind of get that. The idea there, again, Bill talks about, is to help preserve muscle mass. We know from the literature that refeeds don't necessarily cause any long-term recovery in your hormones like leptin, but in the short term, they could help preserve muscle mass with those short-term effects in your hormones. So we'll see what happens. And then what am I going to measure? Well, I'm going to measure my daily calories, macros, and weight, and of course my training, but I'm also going to include, I'm going to measure my biofeedback. I talked about up here. Okay. I'm going to measure my circumference measurements. Just talked about here, neck, waist, chest, biceps, thighs at a minimum. And then the body fat percentage based on those measurements. I'm going to do it the day before I start. I'm going to do it on days 7 and 14. And then I'm going to do it 1 week later after I return to maintenance, because what I want to see is that here's what I suspect is going to happen. At the end of this phase, I'm going to see a loss of not just fat, but probably muscle based on the calculations. But that could be because of the loss in fluid you get from going on such a big deficit. And so I want to allow myself to recover the fluid and glycogen for a week to see if the percentage calculations get to show that I actually didn't lose much muscle at all. Right. And this is modeled after, either Bill's research. What is this? One of his reviews, or maybe what he told me on the podcast. Yeah, it was on the podcast, actually, that episode I was just talking about. He talked about how they thought there was some muscle loss, but then when they recovered, they found that was just fluid, that was reduced, and then it came back and they were good. So that's my plan. This video ended up being longer than I expected, but I hope you find this interesting and maybe it gives you some ideas for yourself. I wouldn't just go run with this, because I need to validate with Bill that this makes sense. And I will get back to everyone on this in the group, as well as the potential for the challenge. So if you're interested in such a challenge and going along with it, put your comment below in the chat, or reach out to me and let me know. so that I can see how much interest there is. All right. Have a pleasant Friday. Have a great weekend. Enjoy. I guess this is the start of fall, right? We are now in a new season. We're now in the fall season. So happy lifting, stay strong. Best with all your nutrition and everything else. We're here for you in the community, in the Wits and Weights community, and signing off. Have a great day.